You're listening to Mark McNease's Fearsome Fiction Podcast. Mysteries, thrillers, and rare finds. Fasten your headphones.
Welcome back to Mark McNease's Fearsome Fiction and to Night Flight to Murder Town, a Marshall James thriller. This week we're offering chapters 22 through 24. When we last left Marshall, he was finding his footing in a New York City that was as thrilling as it was foreign, a city that moved faster than he did, that asked more of him than he expected, and that seemed to be keeping secrets at every turn. In tonight's chapters, those secrets begin to take on weight. Trent hands Marshall a small yellow envelope, a floppy disk he calls insurance, and refuses to say more. It's the kind of thing a man hands off only when he's afraid of what might happen to it. Or to him. Marshall puts the envelope away and goes on with his evening, because what else do? You put on a borrowed coat, you navigate your first New York City subway ride, tokens and all, and you head to Chelsea for what you tell yourself is just dinner. And maybe something more. What he finds at Leland's apartment, though, isn't dinner. It's a little white pill and a great deal of persuasion. And with one small word, sure, Marshall James crosses a line he can't uncross. Chapters 22, 23, and 24. A disc full of secrets. A train into the dark. And the first of many falls to come.
Chapter 22. New York City. 1992. By the time I left Muscles, I was too tired to walk back. I'd just spent 10 years living in a city where everyone drives. Or takes a bus. Or gets a ride with someone. It was going to take time getting used to the lifestyle in New York, which included walking pretty much everywhere, or at least between subway stops. Speaking of which, I hadn't taken a subway, and for a minute I considered going back inside and asking Leland how to do that. I'd passed at least a dozen subway stops along the path from Trent's apartment to the village. I'd seen people hurrying up and down the stairs leading underground. I hadn't imagined what their experience was like, or how exactly you take a subway train at all. The thought of it made me think of Edgar Allan Poe's The Premature Burial, with all that concrete above you and the roar of oncoming trains silencing your screams for help. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the piece of paper Leland had given me with his address. 25th Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues. I decided to take my first subway ride that evening when I went to his apartment, conquering my fear of short stories and being buried alive. For now, I would hail a taxi back to Trent's place. I walked to the curb on Hudson, and sure enough, dozens of yellow taxis were flowing by, most with their lights off as they veered from side to side, paying no mind to lines in the street. Several had their lights on to indicate their availability. One of them spotted me, veered in front of 3 other taxis, and pulled up to the curb so quickly I jumped back, thinking my first real day in the city might be my last. I got in, gave him Trent's address, and held on for dear life as we sped away as quickly and recklessly as I'd ever seen anyone drive in LA. "That works out perfectly, actually," Trent said when I told him I was going out that night and where. "I have plans myself." I didn't tell him I already knew it was his regular night to hook up with the senator. "I have to confess a certain jealousy," he said, shuffling through papers at his desk. He'd been working there when I got back from the gym. "I'd hoped we might, "I'm sorry, Trent," I said. "I'm still processing the whole Mac thing." It was both true and an easy way to avoid the situation. I would grieve the loss of Mac for many years, but it was obvious by plans with Leland that I wasn't off limits. No one really expected me to just have dinner with him. "You don't need to make excuses, Marshall. We knew I wasn't your thing. We weren't each other's thing. No excuses, please. I was not your thing, and I'm still not. I didn't invite you to New York to sleep with you, believe it or not." "I didn't think so. That's a hell of a long way to go for a one-night stand. Unless it proved to be for a lifetime," he said, smiling. "But it's not. So you go and have a good time with Leland, but remember you'll be his boss in a few days. I won't stop you from fraternizing with a subordinate, if that's what you want to call it, but it's never a good idea." I was about to leave and head for a second shower. Even in the cold air, I'd worked up a sweat walking all those blocks, and the cab ride back hadn't made me feel less stale. "I'd like you to keep something for me," he said, causing me to stop and turn back. He reached into the right top desk drawer and pulled out a small padded yellow envelope, holding it out for me. "What's that?" I asked, taking the envelope and opening it to peer inside, where I could see a 3.5-inch hard floppy disk. I knew them well from my years temping in offices. "Insurance," he said. I waited for more. He didn't offer any. "Just put it somewhere, please, and not in the open." "You want me to hide it?" "Yes, Marshal, that's the idea." "Who am I hiding it from?" I said, closing the envelope flap. "Hopefully you'll never find out. Just keep it for me." "Should you tell me what's on it?" He cocked his head and thought about that a moment. "No, I shouldn't, and you wouldn't want me to." "Does this have anything to do with your client in Hong Kong?" No answer. "How about the senator? Are these naked photos or something?" "No, there are no dick pics on there. I may be many things, but I'm not a blackmailer. Just put it somewhere safe, for God's sake, in case." "In case of what?" I asked. "In case of nothing," he said, irritated. "Go do whatever you were going to do. Have a good time with Leland." "You're seeing Daniel Roth," I said, revealing what I knew. "Leland told me this is your night together. And now you know why I didn't give your job to him." "He's too loose-lipped. I'll have to have a conversation with him about that." "Please don't fire him. Not because I said something." "We'll see," he said before swiveling back around in his chair. We were done talking, and he was not going to give me any more information. Insurance. That's all I knew. Put it somewhere safe, take a shower and a nap. Go to Leland's for dinner, and I had to admit, the first night of unbridled sex I'd had in months, followed by a pleasant but non-committal goodbye before heading back. At least that was my plan. Chapter 23. I followed the directions Trent gave me, walking from his apartment to the subway station at Lexington Avenue and 59th Street. He'd offered to have Dennis drive me to Leland's, but I said no. I didn't want to be alone with Dennis, or have him know my business. I'll also admit there was something dangerously alluring about the man, and I didn't like the things it made me imagine. The walk was quick, and it had gotten dark an hour before I'd left. It gave me a different view of the city as I walked along in a winter coat Trent had given me to wear. We were still 6 weeks or more away from anything resembling spring. I would have to get my own coat in the next few days, as well as socks, sweaters, and shirts that were thick enough to keep the chill out. I had never ridden a subway before. They were many years from arriving as a form of public transportation in Los Angeles. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched as people went down into the station while others came hurrying briskly back out. I finally steeled myself and headed down. In those days, people used tokens for the turnstiles. I paid my $15 and got a small plastic baggie filled with them, with some change back. A bored-looking older woman behind a pane of bulletproof glass never looked at me as she took my money, dropped the tokens and change into the slot between us, and went on about the business of being a subway booth attendant. I still didn't know what I was doing. I ripped open the baggie, took out a small round token, the coin of the realm in New York City, and watched a few other people go through the turnstile. Once I'd observed them a few times, I just imitated them. I dropped my token into the slot and pushed through. Suddenly, I was on a platform. The world behind me was markedly different from the world in front of me. A tunnel with train tracks, a sign above me telling incoming passengers what station this was, and dozens of people standing precariously close to the edge as they peered down the empty tunnel trying to will a train's arrival. I knew I was supposed to take the 7 train to 7th Avenue and 23rd Street. From there, I would walk 2 blocks to 25th, head west toward 8th Avenue, and somewhere between them I would find Leland's apartment building. Just as I was running it all through my mind, a train came around the bend. It was my train. It was supposed to take me to Leland's apartment and back. It was supposed to be a slightly harrowing but ultimately harmless train ride for a night of food and maybe sex. It was not supposed to change my life or take me to a place so much darker than any subway tunnel. but that's what it did. Chapter 24. I've never been someone who calls himself flawed. It sounds like a cop-out to me, an excuse for bad behavior. It's not honest enough. I've been weak, I've been deceitful, I've been incredibly self-indulgent, but I've never been flawed. I also don't like to say that some choice I made was not my intention. As in, it was never my intention to hurt you, or it was never my intention to drink myself into a stupor and vomit on the appetizer, assuming I hadn't been too drunk to make it to the restaurant. Failed intentions are no intentions at all. So I can't say it was an accident when I took ecstasy for the first time in Leland's apartment, with Leland providing the drug and acting as a guide into the experience. It may come as a surprise to know I hadn't done E before, given my history of drinking and drugging. But it wasn't something available when I was in high school. Those were the acid and hashish days. And by the time I moved to LA, I was pretty much a coke and downers guy when I used it all. That's another possibly surprising fact. I was mostly a lush. There are lots of us for whom alcohol is our oblivion of choice, and after a couple of years in my teens, I really wasn't into pharmaceuticals. Hell, even years later when I got them from a doctor for legitimate pain and the occasional bout of depression, I never liked taking them. I'd known plenty of pillheads and didn't want to be one. So there I was, in Leland's studio apartment in Chelsea, having expected to have dinner there or go out, when it became clear neither of those options were on offer at the moment. "There's plenty of time to eat later," he said. He was wearing shorts that were unfashionably skimpy for 1992, not quite Hot's pants, but very warm. The man had legs. It didn't matter that the temperature outside was in the 40s. The furnace was blowing in that little apartment. I noticed he had one of those old-fashioned steam heaters, something I later learned were ubiquitous in New York. It kept clanging every few minutes, as if someone was banging on it with a hammer, and less frequently it would hiss and spit out a new round of steam forced through the pipes. "I can open a window," he said, seeing me stare at the radiator when it belched out more heat. The shorts were complemented with a red tank top. The man had arms, too. It was clear he didn't just hang out at the front desk at Muscles. "I'm fine," I said. "I have to get used to it. The heat, I mean. Everything's different here." "I hope so. I spent a month in LA once, not my thing. New York is real, you know? Actually, I didn't. How about a drink to take the edge off?" "I can tell you're a little nervous." "There's no reason to be." There were plenty of reasons to be nervous, but I didn't feel like itemizing them at the time. "I don't drink," I said, as he made his way closer for no obvious reason. I'd been sitting on a beige couch while he'd stood several feet away. "How about some E?" I knew what it was. I'd worked in a few bars where drugs were sold as part of the ambience. "I don't—" "What, Marshall? You don't what?" "I've never what, Marshall? There's a first time for everything." "Sure," I said, as I felt my resolve fall away like the floor dropping beneath me. With a simple word, I'd crossed a line. I wouldn't drink, so I told myself, but what was the harm in a little feel-good pill? Trent had VIC, very important company, and I wasn't going anywhere for several hours. My appetite vanished as suddenly as my resolve. Leland clapped his hands like a child who'd just been told Santa was at the door. He hurried over to a nightstand by a large curtain, which I soon learned hid a Murphy bed, and pulled out a small baggie. He'd already placed a glass of water on the coffee table, just in case I said yes, and in less than a minute I'd swallowed my very first tab of ecstasy. Oh my God.
You're listening to Mark McNease's Fearsome Fiction Podcast. Mysteries, thrillers, and rare finds. Fasten your headphones.